Hey there, wonderful parents. I'm beyond excited about our episode today, featuring Laura Reardon, a certified child behavior specialist with over 2 decades of hands-on experience in the parenting trenches. Laura's journey as home daycare owner and nanny for 20 years unveiled a profound truth. Traditional parenting tools often prioritize short-term control over long-term learning. In this eye-opening episode, Laura shares insights from the latest neuroscience research, exploring how our children perceive sensations as safe or challenging and how it influences their behavior. Ever wondered why your kids' meltdowns or defiance happen? Laura breaks it down. When sensations trigger their fight or flight response, they act out. The good news? Laura's got practical tips on coregulation, or in her words, responding to stormy behavior with calm and curiosity. But here's the kicker. It's not just about staying calm. Laura emphasizes the other 50%, becoming curious about what's driving your child's behavior, recognizing they're not bad kids, but kids experiencing overwhelming sensations. Stay tuned to the second part, where Laura delivers an abundance of actionable advice with a real-life example featuring my own preteen, also named Laura. Trust me, you don't want to miss this interview. The most important thing we can do as parents is to grow into our best self while holding our child's hand as they grow into their best self. And Laura's tips will help us do just that. Hi, I'm Billy, and this is the Unlock Your Child's Full Potential podcast. I'm a mom of 3 lovely girls, and I'm looking for answers. I'm looking for ways to fill the gaps left by the school system and teach my kids the lessons that are going to prepare them for real life. I want to learn practical tips that I can use to raise capable and confident young people who are kind, caring, and authentic, and who bring value to the world. I know it's a lot, but I think as parents, we have the unique role of nurturing the potential of the special human beings entrusted to our care. We can't expect school and the teachers to do everything, and we don't want to let the environment decide who our kids become. It's up to us to coach our children on how to be successful and fulfilled. That's my goal here, to talk to as many parents, educators, experts, you name it, and ask the questions. Look for the universal principles. Find as many tools as possible to be a better parent and give my kids a head start in life. If that resonates with you, join me every Wednesday and let's inspire each other to create an environment where our children can blossom into the best versions of themselves. Welcome, Laura.
Thank you, Billy. Thank you for having me on your podcast. And I'm really happy to be here. I love talking about this topic. My passion is to share what I know now and wish I knew then. And so I love the opportunity to, speak with parents. So thank you for having me.
How old are your kids?
My children are grown. My oldest is 22 and graduated from college and now working in his first job. And my daughter is 19. She is a sophomore in college.
Okay, so you've been doing that for a long time.
Yes.
And you mentioned you wish you knew better. What are you referring to?
Well, that's a great question because as a coach, I've really evolved to specialize in a particular topic, and that is stormy kids. My passion is creating a new lens for parents to look through as they view their kids' stormy behavior and a new way to respond. Well, what I mean by stormy behavior to start with looks like, meltdowns, aggression, controlling behavior, sibling rivalry, disrespect, and defiance. That's the kind of behavior you tend to see on the surface. And then, yes. So what's underneath that? In our culture, I know as a parent, when I was first starting out, I was taught to use traditional parenting tools. And what I've learned over the years through my life experience together with my education is that, in fact, traditional parenting tools are rooted in the understanding that our child's behavior is always in their control, and therefore we can give them the opportunity to make a choice and then experience the consequences of that choice. So it all makes a lot of sense. And we all, as parents, every single one of us, have the best intentions, and we're all always doing the best we can with the information that we have. I know I did when my children were younger. But what I've learned over the years, because I am passionate about these kids, I've educated myself a lot about what's underneath this behavior. And so my focus has been honing in on the latest research in neuroscience, and that changed my world, understanding what neuroscience teaches us about why our kids act in stormy ways. So what does that mean? So what that means is that in most cases, when our kids are acting stormy on the outside, what's happening, and yes, we talk about emotions as parents, and as a culture, we talk a lot about managing your emotions, but really it goes a layer under that, because emotions begin with a sensation in your body. And so what happens is that we are actually not always in control of our behavior as children in particular, because they have not yet developed the ability to self-regulate. You know, the basic principle is that our nervous system can unconsciously impact our behavior. And our nervous system essentially is the back and forth communication between our brain and our body. And this is how it works. Our body experiences our world through our sensations. The sensations we experience in our external world, the ones we think about, the basic five senses, you know, our ability to hear, see, smell, taste, and touch. But also we experience sensations in our internal world, in our body, sensations such as hunger, thirst, our heartbeat, you know, all of these internal sensations, pain, discomfort, tightness. These are all internal sensations. And then we also experience sensations in our relationships with other people. So, you know, people talk about, oh, you get that feeling, you get that sense, listen to that. Well, what that's really talking about are the senses that we experience in our relationships with other people. So, for example, the way they look at us, their tone of voice, the space that they give us, we pick up on those sensations in that way as well. So what happens is our body experiences all of these sensations and sends that information up to our brain. And then what happens is that based on our genetics, based on how sensitive we are to sensations, for some of us, we're more sensitive than average. For some of us, we're less sensitive than average. The kids I work with tend to be more sensitive than average to the sensations that they experience. So based on our sensitivity, and also based on what associations we have with these sensations in the past. In other words, do we have a good association with feeling this thing in the past, or do we have a bad association with feeling this thing in the past? And those two things essentially determine whether we experience sensations as safe and manageable, or unsafe and too challenging. If we experience them as safe and manageable, then we are able to naturally act as our best selves, even when life is challenging. We are able to stay calm. We are able to respond in effective ways to what's happening in the world around us. But when we experience these sensations as unsafe or too challenging, our brain tells our body to prepare to defend ourselves, to prepare to fight or flight. And all of these physiological things happen to prepare our body to fight or flight, to keep ourselves safe. And what that looked like for our ancestors is they might have seen an animal and they react by attacking or running away. But what that looks like in today's world is that, you know, our kids experience an uncomfortable sensation that triggers their fight or flight response. And that fight or flight behavior shows up as the meltdowns, the aggression, the controlling behavior, the sibling rivalry, or the disrespect and defiance.
Wow. haven't realized that, even all those sensations and mainly your past experience with them. This sounds interesting. So if our main response to our child's tantrum has been negative, the next time they get dysregulated easier. So how can we support our children? And why is it so hard for us as parents as well to regulate ourselves in that situation in order to be able to co-regulate with our child?
Right. All great questions. So first, I just want to acknowledge that that's part of what drives my work. What you said about, wow, I didn't realize that. And most of us as parents don't realize that. And that's because most of our pediatricians, educators, therapists are not yet familiar with this latest research in neuroscience and how it impacts our ability to parent in the most effective way. And so I am passionate about sharing this message. And because I know as a parent, I was always looking to do my best and I was always learning. And so when I learned this information, it really changed my world. So that's why I want to share it with as many people as possible. And then your other two questions, how do we best respond to our child in that moment then, now that we are looking at that behavior through a new lens? And how do we stay calm ourselves? Because this is a really triggering experience. Let's start with ourselves. We have to start with ourselves because we are not able to respond effectively if we're actually also losing it. So I talked about for our kids how it's really challenging for them. I shouldn't even say that. I should say it's not possible for them to pause their fight or flight response, recognizing that they're not actually in danger and respond in a more effective way because they don't yet have the development in their brain to support the ability to do that. The good news is there are ways that we can respond that support the development of that. But as adults, essentially the same thing is happening. We all know that experience of getting triggered, lashing out. We attack or we withdraw because we got so overwhelmed by what we were feeling. And sometimes we have an awareness of what that is, and sometimes we don't. And yes, as parents, we have fully developed brains. But for many of us, we were raised in families, we were raised in a culture that really didn't teach the skills of self-regulation. What's interesting is today, as parents, we talk a lot more about that. We think a lot more about that. As educators and as parents, we're often teaching the skills. We're talking about, taking deep breaths, or let's do this or that to help calm you. So we've kind of gotten savvy in understanding that these are important skills that we want to teach our kids. The trick is that we assume, I know I did as a parent, I evolved from the consequences and the rewards to responding to stormy behavior by teaching skills. And then I would get so frustrated and wonder, what's wrong with me? What's wrong with my kid when the next time, those skills were not implemented and the same thing happened again? And I speak with so many parents who feel the same way. What's wrong with me? What's wrong with my kid? I'm teaching the skills. Why isn't my kid able to self-regulate?
And why is it so hard for me to self-regulate, even if I know the skills? And, this is where I'm at.
That's such a great observation, because it's like for our kids, teaching skills is valuable and important. We just have to understand that they're not able to implement those on their own yet. It's like learning math. You can think of it this way, in that you need to have the stage of development to have the capacity to learn math. An infant isn't going to be able to learn math no matter how hard we try to teach our infant. But once a child has the brain capacity to learn math, they then still need us to teach it to them. They still need us to teach them the skills of math. So self-regulation is actually the same way. They need to have the brain capacity to be ready to learn, but then we still need to teach them. It's not innate. So that's why as adults, even though we have the brain development, we may not have the skills because we may not have been taught them. We may not have learned them yet. And so I always want to send this reassuring message that it's never too late for us as parents to, develop our self-regulation skills. So that's where it starts. And I teach a 3-step calm plan to parents. It has 3 basic components. How do we set ourselves up for success? What can we do in the moment when we feel like we're going to lose it? And then what can we do? What happens if we lost it? What happens if we keep losing it? What can we do then? And then for the kids, I have a 3-step storm plan. Same idea. What can we do to set them up for success? What can we do in the moment? And, what happens if the problem keeps happening?
You mentioned they get the capacity to learn these skills. At what age does that happen?
Yes, I'm so glad you asked that question because I forgot to talk about that. And it's so important because when we have an infant, they have essentially almost no, I won't say 0, but almost no ability to self-regulate. And that's why when our infant cries, we want to respond. We want to become curious about what they need, give them what they need, and help them self-regulate because they are born with no ability to do that on their own. Again, I say no ability. They have the ability to cry, and that's how they get their needs met. They have the ability to maybe suck their thumb. They have the ability to maybe push their feet up against their crib. That pressure, that gentle pressure can be regulating. So they do have some very basic ways to calm themselves. And then at about the age of 4 to 5 is when self-regulation just begins to start developing. However, self-regulation does not develop at a particular age because of individual differences. For our kids who have challenge, well, I want to start talking about, a diagnosis, but I understand those can often happen in later years. Certainly for a child who has a diagnosis of ADHD or autism or is a deeply feeling kid, learning regulation is certainly going to be more challenging for our kids with individual differences. And so what happens in terms of, okay, when do our kids develop this ability to do this? It's so individual. So I can say that it begins to develop at the age of 4 to 5, and it develops slowly over time in years and decades, depending on individual differences. We all have that kid. Well, that's not true. For some of us, we all have that kid who it just seems like, or we know that kid, our nephew or our neighbor, who it just seems like self-regulation, staying calm, staying in control, just seems to come naturally for that kid. And we often know that kid who the opposite is true. And that is because of individual differences.
Okay. I just wanted to set the expectations because parents should know they shouldn't expect from their child to self-regulate. But if they have a teen, for example, how does that look for them? Are teens grown enough to teach them self-regulation practices and expect from them to use them?
That's a really good question too. And that's a tricky one because in truth, our brain is not fully developed until our mid to late 20s. So it would be typical for self-regulation to take years and decades to develop fully. Not to say it wouldn't be present, but it might not be fully developed until our mid to late 20s. Added to that, individual differences. For some kids, it's going to be less challenging, and for some kids, it's going to be more challenging to develop self-regulation skills. So it's just, it's really individual. It's different for each child. So yeah, just having that awareness. It's not like crawling. It's not a skill that has a small window of when you would expect that skill to show up. And then once it shows up, it's there. It's much more complicated than that. And that's also why you'll hear parents sometimes say, but I know he has this ability to do this because I've seen him do it. Well, that's the trick with the skill that's developing slowly over time, is that sometimes we will have the capacity in that moment to demonstrate self-regulation skills. And then in other moments, we won't.
Oh, yeah, that's tricky. Are there any steps we can take in the moment? And you said before that to set yourself up for success. Any specific things we can tell parents to use at home to help their kids?
Yeah, absolutely. In terms of setting ourselves up for success, I mean, essentially, we want to look at those basics for ourselves as parents and for our kids, because again, it's those sensations, for example, of I feel sick, I feel tired, I feel hungry, I feel thirsty. These really basic sensations play an important role in this, in keeping us regulated. And oftentimes what happens is it's not just one thing. It's usually, if it's something really triggering, then yeah, it could just be one thing. But oftentimes it's a layering of, I didn't sleep well last night, I skipped lunch, my kids are fighting and it's time to make dinner. And you've just got this layering of stuff that ultimately surfaces as too challenging. And then that's when we get triggered. So knowing that, it makes sense that the first step would be having an awareness of our environment, having an awareness of getting our core needs met for things such as, are we sleeping 7 to 8 hours a night as parents? Of course, for children, it's dependent on their age, how much sleep that they need. And the reality is that for parents, especially of young children, is that once we have children, our responsibility does not end at bedtime. Oftentimes, depending on the age of your child, the stage of your child, or what's happening in that moment, sometimes our kids need us in the middle of the night, and that's part of the job. So recognizing that we can only do the best we can, but we can, again, have that awareness that sleep matters and sleep's an important part of this. And so we can make decisions in places where we do have control. We can make decisions that support a good night's sleep. We can consider, are we eating a variety of food groups throughout the day? We can consider, are we hydrating during the day? Are we creating opportunities to move our bodies during the day? Whether that's just, you're an active parent and you're moving your body a lot in the day, just, your job of caring for your children, or whether it's, you're going out for walk for a half an hour, whether you're going to the gym or whatever works for you. So again, just looking at even the most basic needs that we have, a really important starting point for setting ourselves up for success in staying self-regulated. And for our kids, we want to look at, the environment that we're setting up for them as well. Are we creating time for play? Play is so important for kids, not structured play, not soccer, not art class, just this opportunity to have downtime, screen-free time to play, because that's how our kids work out what they still need to work out, how they process things that are triggering for them. And so that's incredibly important. And we also want to really prioritize connection. We want to make sure we're creating an opportunity to connect with our child at least once a day, because connection essentially is creating emotional and physical safety between you and your child. And that's very regulating. Again, we just want to kind of look at these basic things in the environment, but then, okay, we're in that moment and our child is acting stormy. Our child's behavior is out of control. Our child is out of control. So how do we respond? And the way we respond is with a term called coregulation. Now, there may be some of your listeners that have a familiarity with this term. For some of your listeners, this may be a new term. Either way, I want to share my definition of coregulation because I think there's a lot of confusion about what it is. And the way I describe it is I describe it essentially as responding to stormy behavior with calm and curiosity. A lot of people who are familiar with the term think it's just about staying calm. For example, you'll see parents at the playground and their child's having a meltdown and they're staying calm. So let's not minimize that. That's huge. But they're staying calm, but they're not curious. They might be staying calm by having a conversation with another parent, maybe even staying calm by just kind of looking at the environment around them, nature. Maybe that helps them stay calm, which is a beautiful thing. Maybe they're staying calm by looking at their phone. But staying calm is only 50% of it. The other 50% is becoming curious about what's underneath our child's behavior. What sensations are they experiencing right now that are triggering for them? And how can we help them be with those sensations, learn to develop a tolerance for those sensations, learn to create positive associations with those sensations? How can we help them do that? And so that could be as simple as, recognizing, it's lunchtime, time to get home and have some lunch, and then all will be well. Maybe it's rest, they need the rest, or maybe they're thirsty, all these just really basic core needs. And so again, responding with curiosity, we just want to kind of have awareness, like, what might be going on? Obviously, if our child is very young, we have to just do a lot of educated guesses. If our child is older, as we parent our child over time and as they grow, we can involve them in the thinking and the curiosity, so we can be helping them to develop that skill for themselves. And so it could be that all our child needs in that moment is just our presence, our compassionate presence, like, I am right here with you. I know this is hard, and we're going to get through this together. It could be that our child needs a walk, let's just go take a little walk. It could be that our child needs to do a calming activity. It could be an opportunity to do some breathing, fun breathing playtime as we're introducing that to our child, blowing bubbles or putting the teddy bear on the tummy and playing the game of, breathing in and out and watching the teddy bear go up and down on your tummy. For our older kids, again, this would evolve depending on the age and stage of our child. But essentially, it's responding again with calm, which, yes, that's huge. And that's a big step to get there. And then curiosity, recognizing, okay, my child's not a bad kid. My child is experiencing a sensation that is triggering their fight or flight behavior. And I can support the development of their self-regulation by responding with calm and curiosity, so that one day they learn to respond to that feeling of being triggered with calm and curiosity.
I love that. That's a great thing to learn as a child. Okay, I'm hopping in for just a minute to tell you about the free resource I recently created. It's called the Connection Blueprint, and it consists of 5 tools that will help you improve the relationship with your child and create an environment where your kid feels seen, heard, and loved. After all the lessons we want to teach our kids require us to first have a trusting relationship with them, so that they're ready to hear our advice and lean on our support. Anytime I feel disconnected and out of sync with my own children, I get back to this blueprint, put the tools to practice, and it works wonders. I'm sure having a loving and trusting relationship with your kids is a top priority for you too. So check the show notes and get your copy of the Connection Blueprint. I often find it those moments when, and I'm talking about my preteen right now, usually she is not open to answering my questions when I'm showing curiosity. Like when she's dysregulated, she's just mean to her sisters. If I know she's fed, she had enough sleep, she might be tired, but I'm not sure. What am I to do with that behavior? If I'm not able to get her for a walk, because I have 3 kids, I cannot just leave the younger ones at home. And I want to be able to support my oldest daughter, but I'm not sure how to do that. Any advice?
I love this question. That's so great. It's so helpful to have a real life example. Can you set that up for me? Paint the picture just a little bit more clearly for me. Like, what's happening and how are you responding, and what's not working about how you're responding?
Okay, I'm getting my kids from school. We are in the car. The 3 of them are in the back seat, and everyone wants to share about their day. And usually they're interrupting each other. But my oldest daughter, her name is Laura, by the way, she just picks on her sisters and uses mean language. And I get triggered when I hear that. So I try to ask some questions in order to see what's bothering her. But she's not opening up. She's just, it's okay, it's fine. but keeps teasing her sisters. And I'm not getting anywhere. Even if I decide not to talk to her and focus on the other two, she still has some mean remarks. And it just builds up. At some point, I'm not so calm anymore. And I'm just wondering how to help her. And we are in the car. We're driving home for maybe half an hour.
And when you say asking questions, are you asking her questions about her day, or are you asking her questions about her behavior?
Both. I see when I'm asking about her behavior, she is not responding well. So this is something she doesn't want to discuss. Why is she being mean? Or I'm not using these exact words, but
why are you acting that way, essentially?
Why are you acting that way? Yeah. I ask about her day, and she doesn't share a problem or some issue that she had. So all is well on the surface.
Okay, so this is a great example. And this brings us right to step 3. So we were just talking about, how to respond in the moment. Well, when a problem keeps happening over and over again and how we're responding in the moment isn't working, it's not helping, that's time for step 3, which is essentially happens in the calm after the storm, not in the moment, when we can process and problem solve. And so what you could try is finding a moment where kind of like a calm, connected moment. For some kids, that could be when if you ever have the opportunity to be one-on-one in the car. I know a lot of people talk about that working. For my kid, that was the worst possible time I could try to have a connecting conversation with her, because she kind of felt trapped and didn't have control because she couldn't leave if she chose to. So I like to share that story because almost everyone suggests, have that conversation in the car. Well, it doesn't work for every kid. So this just gets right to the heart of it, which is this is such personal work because of individual differences. And that's why I can share ideas, but it's up to the parent to really know their child. They know their child best, and to experiment and then learn more. So it starts with creating an opportunity to have that conversation. You could start it off by saying something like, I've noticed that the car ride home can be a tough time. What's happening for you? And again, this sort of gets into the kind of questions you're probably attempting to ask in the moment. But in the moment, she doesn't have the capacity to be calm enough to engage in a logical conversation. She's kind of in this fight or flight response, where she doesn't have the self-regulation to act as her best self. She's acting as her stormy self because her behavior is triggered right now. And she's just in this automatic, unconscious fight or flight response. She doesn't want to be acting that way. She's essentially feeling out of control in that moment. She may or may not have some insight into what's happening in that moment. So you can ask the question, what's going on for you? What's happening for you in that moment? And it may reveal something important. Yeah, well, there's this friend at school and or she may have no idea, but it's an opening to the conversation to gather more information, essentially, because it could be that you have more insight into what's happening for her than she may, because it could be simple overwhelm, I had to act as my best self all day long, even though it was challenging. And now I see my mom, and mom equals safety. And I can just, be my real self right now, let it all out, just totally, act as my worst self, because I know I am safe with my family. They may get upset, but I know I am safe. So it could be as simple as that, or there could be a backstory. So again, we just want to embrace that curiosity, that non-judgmental curiosity. I know you're not a bad kid. I know you're a good kid who's having, this reaction to something right now. And let's become curious about what that might be. And also, when we start by encouraging our child to talk and we focus on listening, that creates an openness in them to then listen to us. When we start by talking, they tend to just tune us out. But when we start by communicating the message that we value what they have to say and what their experience is, that creates a foundation of openness to listening and to solving the problems. Another thing that you can ask is, I've noticed that when I try to help, what I'm doing to try to help in the moment, what I'm doing in the car isn't helping. It's kind of making it worse for you. And I don't want to make it worse for you. I want to help. I want to help you. And so do you have any ideas about how I could respond in that moment that would help you feel better rather than feeling worse? And when we include our child in that problem solving, again, it does lots of positive things, like makes them more interested in solving the problem, more likely to actually implement the solution identified. And all that to say, one thing I haven't mentioned yet that's so important is that all of this is rooted in holding boundaries. It's a lot easier, quite frankly, to hold boundaries when our kid is hitting someone, because that's tangible and physical. I won't let you. And, using the least amount of force necessary, doing what we need to do to prevent our child from hitting somebody. I won't let you, and I'm right here with you. It's the and, I won't let you. I'm going to keep everybody safe physically, but I'm also going to keep everyone safe emotionally, because I'm recognizing you're not a bad kid. You're a good kid who's in a fight or flight response right now. Words are so much trickier. And I've lived this world. So exactly. I get it. It's so much trickier. So I think the kinds of things that we can do include, we can still use those words in the moment. I won't let you. Again, a lot trickier, but what that can look like, if we're in the car, that's tough, right? We're all in the car. And so we have to really look at that individual situation, depending on what's happening, about how we can protect the people around our child from getting emotionally hurt as opposed to physically hurt. This work really has to be done outside of the moment, because in the moment, just survive the best you can, do the best you can. I know everybody's going to do the best you can, but this is really work that needs to be done outside of the moment. What I would do, for example, is I'd have a conversation with my other children, and I would just really normalize their sister's reaction. I would just help them understand, learning to act as our best selves when we're having a hard time takes a really long time to develop, and it becomes easier for some of us as compared to others. But when your sister's doing X, this is not how she really feels. This is her in an out of control moment. I'm here to try to help everybody stay safe. That's my job. And so let's talk about, what can we do for you in that moment when that's happening? You can normalize the behavior, help them have some perspective, but also, what's a plan? Like, okay, so when your sister is acting like that, what's a plan for how you can feel safe? And again, if you're in the house, it can be, I'm going to go to my bedroom and I'm going to do this, or I'm going to, whatever. It's a little easier. When you're in the car, you're going to have to get a little more creative. Maybe you're going to put your headphones on and listen to some calming music. Maybe you're going to pull out a piece of paper and draw. Things that you can do in that confined space without physically being able to walk away. What can you do in that moment to help you feel safe? And I will add something so important to that again can happen in the moment and outside the moment. And that is validating their experience. This is so hard. It makes sense that you feel angry. And again, depending on our child, we may not want to do that in the moment, or it may not be words, it may be more nonverbal, but it's really unique to each kid. But we want to be sure we are not just seeing and understanding our child that's struggling, but seeing and understanding our child that is experiencing those consequences or that experience. And so that's really powerful. So we kind of got off on that track of the sibling for a moment, but to go back to your child that's struggling, again, the way I'm responding in that moment isn't working. And it all started with holding boundaries. I can't let you be mean to your siblings. I can recognize you're doing your best. And I know that you don't want to act this way. And I want to help you because I know you don't want to act this way. So how can I help you? And again, she may have some ideas, but you can also have your own ideas. And it's going to be a process. It's not likely going to be a one-time conversation. And the next time you get in the car, this plan implements perfectly. It's likely that after a week or two, you'll reconnect and say, well, this part seems to be helping, but that part's not. How can we continue to tweak this? And all that said, we can recognize that, like having to sometimes take care of our children in the middle of the night is part of the reality of parenting. Also, part of the reality of parenting is that life is going to be challenging. Our kids are going to take years and decades to grow and develop the skills we want for them to have today. And so a lot of it is just changing our definition of success from the car ride home was calm to I feel good about the way I responded to what was happening on the car ride home because I feel like it's going to put my kids on the path towards one day having the skills to be able to stay calm without needing my support.
That's a great point. Your definition of success. I love it. And I also love all the advice. I think it will be very helpful to talk to her siblings as well, because I have been trying to implement a plan, although not that systematically, as you said. So I will definitely use your advice. Thank you for that.
My pleasure.
I know you create personalized parenting plans. How can people find you and work with you if they're interested?
Well, I would say if what I'm talking about resonates with any of your listeners, that the next step is to go to my website and download a free cheat sheet for how to stay calm in the moment, because that's something we didn't have the time to talk about. And so as we've recognized, being able to stay calm as a parent is step number one. And so again, go to my website, it's laurareardoncoaching.com, and they can download that free cheat sheet right there.
Awesome. And they will be able to find your social accounts there?
Yeah, I'm Laura Reardon Coaching pretty much everywhere on Instagram, Facebook, and that's my website as well.
Amazing. Thank you, Laura. It was such a pleasure talking to you.
It was a pleasure speaking with you as well. Again, thank you.
Thank you so much for listening and letting me be a part of your day. If you enjoyed this episode or the show in general, please share it with a friend and help me reach more moms around the world. Also, if you find some value in this podcast and would like to help support it, please visit my Ko-fi page. The link is in the show notes. Any contribution is much appreciated. And lastly, don't forget to subscribe so you get notified when a new episode drops. I'll see you next week.